Hello, this is Mr. Smith, and this is the second lesson on English Language Paper 2, Question 5, for the week beginning the 6th of July 2020. This video is primarily for Year 10 students at Reigate School, though of course other students are welcome to watch. As usual, we will be starting with our An Inspector Calls SPAG exercise. Remember, you can copy out the paragraph or just make the corrections themselves by correcting the individual words. It's up to you. So please read through the paragraph, pause the video perhaps, and then make the corrections. Sheila needs a capital S, and there's correct spellings of celebrating. Of course, Gerald needs a capital G. Optimistic and future are correctly spelled, and then remember the apostrophe for Eva Smith's death. A quick reminder then of the mark scheme or the marks for the question 5 of language paper 2. It's 40 marks altogether, 24 for content, 16 for SPAG. The question will be formed through a thought-provoking statement. There will be a specification for the genre, audience and purpose. This is another question from an actual GCSE exam. I believe it's June 2017. The statement is, parents today are overprotective. They should let their children take part in adventurous, even risky activities to prepare them for later life. Write an article for a broadsheet newspaper in which you argue for or against this statement. Now, fortunately, this writing question is an article again. It's quite a nice progression from last week's lesson, where it was also an article. So a reminder of the requirements for an article: a headline or powerful title. Remember, if you can't think of one, just leave a little bit of space, and if you do think of one, then you can always write it in later. Please do not get stuck on the headline. What's technically known as a stand first or an introductory paragraph. Make sure your paragraphs are in an effective sequence. It should be formal but still engaging. Particularly as this is a broadsheet newspaper specifically, you should avoid too much slang or avoid too much casual language, but it doesn't mean it has to be completely dry in tone. Now, the difference between this week and last week is that instead of it being explaining, it's arguing for or against. And it's very, very important that you show you understand the purpose. The purpose this time is to argue for or against. So what is meant by this? You must make the case for one side of the argument, and I should have put that in bold. One side of the argument. Briefly show you understand the other side of the argument, what's called counter-argument, but mostly argue for your side. So recognize maybe one counter-argument and then mainly focus on your side. Whereas in the past, or last week I should say, in the past, is much more about being balanced between the two sides. That's the main way to think of it. Explaining has a range of ideas from both sides. Arguing for or against, you have most of it from your side and maybe one idea from the other side. Think about rhetorical questions, but again, please don't overuse them. Facts and statistics again, because it's an article in a newspaper. Experts, remember those can be made up, though don't make them sound strange. And maybe a little bit of emotive language. So remember the statement one more time. Parents today are overprotective. They should let their children take part in adventurous, even risky activities to prepare them for later life. So again, I've just created a simple way of planning. You must plan in order to be able to sequence your ideas correctly. So the two sides of parenting: parents should be protective and parents should let their child take lots of risks. Now, it's most likely that your point of view lies somewhere in the middle. However, it's quite important to try and think about the side that you're going to take. And you can start that by thinking of as many arguments for parents being protective as possible and as many arguments for parents letting their child take lots of risks. So please pause the video now and create your own table. Remember, this can be on a piece of paper or this can be on the computer. These are the arguments that I've come up with. Now, this question was in 2017, so of course this wasn't during the pandemic, but I have chosen to include it just because it is such a topical issue and it relates to parents and their children. If this is a bit of a distressing discussion for you, then of course leave it out. But I've put the pandemic in, the prevalence of car accidents, the influence of social media, and the fact that young people can be the victims of crime, or unfortunately sometimes the perpetrators of crime. And then arguments for taking lots of risks, building independence, having resilience or character, understanding that life is difficult in reality. Life is not always easy. And also perhaps in a way maybe a more positive argument that COVID will pass. It seems difficult to understand right now or believe right now, but it will pass. Now, when you get to this point, you need to think about which position you want to take. And because remember, we are looking at an argument for or against. I've chosen to argue that parents should let their children take risks. And as you can see, I've highlighted that side. I've also highlighted one argument from the other side. Remember what I said, you recognise one argument. Of course, you are more than welcome to argue that parents should be protective, but then you need to think about one argument from the risk side. Remember the examiner's report, appropriate use of techniques, a sense of momentum when sequencing your paragraphs, good use of vocabulary, a range of punctuation, things like semicolons if you can. Don't stack your work full of language techniques every sentence. Don't use words that you completely misunderstand. And of course, don't make the sequence random. So this is my plan. I'll start by saying that it's tempting to want to protect children, but they need to slowly build independence. Then you see I've noticed the other side, or recognized the other side, I should say. COVID is real and understandable. And that is understandable, that is increased worry. I then immediately answer that point. COVID will pass and children are maybe more resilient than we think. I then finish strongly. Meeting the challenges now will mean children can face more and bigger challenges as an adult. So there's a sequence, there's a momentum, there's a building of the argument. A brief introduction, recognizing the other side, answering that point, which is another point I should make actually, being able to argue against the counter argument, sort of neutralize the counter argument, and then finishing strongly and positively. Remember, do not start with I disagree or I agree with the statement, because it's so important that you don't do that. Now, I haven't written out a paragraph because I really feel like I want you to have a go yourselves. I've just started with the headline. Now, a helicopter parent is one that kind of, sort of metaphorically and literally perhaps hovers around their child, so it's perhaps a little bit too protective. So it's up to you now to try and think about what you would do, how you would plan your work, and try and write one paragraph later this week to answer the language question. What is your view? What is your opinion? So thank you very much for watching Year 10. I hope this video has been helpful, and look out for other videos and other helpful resources throughout the week. Thank you.